we're on.
Okay, I believe we're on. I just want to point out our helpful restream information is saying offline.
Yeah, it is not always the most helpful.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third week. I know what's going on. Of Hind's Feet on High Places. This is our summer read book. This is our No Reading Required book club. We read the book, so you don't necessarily have to. And at the same time, I really like this story. I think it is worth reading, and there's the glare off it, so I'm going to put it up here. Hind's Feet on High Places is an allegory, and we are on chapters 7, 8, and 9 this week. And you have lots of thoughts.
I do. Not only that, this is the first week out of the first three that I've actually finished the last chapter of our reading assignment. For some reason, the first week, life got busy. I didn't get a chance to read till the day before, so I didn't catch all three chapters. The next week, I thought I had read all three, and then you're like, no, you only read the first two. And I went, oh, well, that sucks. So this time I finished up to the end of our reading assignment yesterday, and we had a very, very, very brief chat yesterday, just to confirm that we were both at the right place, and we are. So...
We've actually had quite a few chats this week about the book, whereas the previous two book club videos, we hadn't formulated any thoughts. This time, one of the things that happened in this book, or this reading week, as I was rereading it, Kat, what are you getting into? Okay, the cat needs to go. She is nibbling at cords.
I will clear her out. I'll be right back.
Well, he's saving our cords from the cat. You might notice that our backdrop or our space is different. Maybe you don't. We are now in our new apartment, and these paint samples are the samples we are deciding to paint this wall as a streaming backdrop. I'm leaning to this color.
Yes, that is a color that we both thought would look really good. Yeah, there's a couple of these colors that we were like, oh, those look really nice. And then at one point,
when they were the small squares, I really liked this. No, not that one. This one. This one was like my choice when it was on small, and I kind of like it on screen, but to be in the room, this is my favorite.
Yeah, we were looking at it at one point. The sun was coming in. We went, it's not just kind of look dusty. Like we need to wipe down the walls. And you're like, yeah, it kind of does.
So, we're in the process of moving tonight and tomorrow night, and tonight is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The remainder of all the things that are small, so the rest of the kitchen, the bathroom, clothes from the bedroom, and then we have a back office that was also our board game storage and craft supplies, and it has everything in it. It's a little daunting. We're moving all of those this week so that on Saturday, Alex and some strong people, my job is to order pizza and make lemonade. They're going to bring
and go, oh, that goes there.
Yeah, I'm traffic control. I know which room each of the items goes in, but that's the day they're going to bring the couch and the furniture and all the beds, bookshelves, all those things are going to come over on Saturday, and we will be moved in.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm just double checking to make sure that we're streaming okay.
Okay.
Look, day 8 of Holy Week again.
Oh.
Restream is
broken.
Very broken. I don't know why it keeps doing that, but yeah, we're gonna have to. I think we're gonna have to go into Restream itself and update it from there, or we might have to re-enter the streaming key or something. It is connecting to Facebook and YouTube. It's just giving us the wrong titles, so we'll have to retitle again.
Little frustrated. Okay, so Hind's Feet on High Places. Something that I noticed in this chapter was, or in this reading, there was a lot more altars that Much Afraid was laying things down on, and so I'm a nerd. I made an Excel sheet.
I can open it up for you if you'd like.
And I love this for myself because I sometimes like going and seeing themes. So I think an altar moment for Much Afraid is a significant part of this story. So far, by the end of chapter 9, we have seen her have 9 moments, 7 moments, 7. Chapter 9, 7 moments. So how my Excel sheet goes this way. I have what altar number it is, what chapter, what page it is in the book that I'm reading, that the moment happens, and then I was using a PDF to confirm. So I was using like Control F to find the word altar. So I also have the PDF thing, and then I go, what was the reason? What was the thing that had happened in her life or in her journey that made her pause? Or and sometimes it was the shepherd said, make an altar. Sometimes it was not. It was something she learned herself, and she made. There wasn't an altar so much as this is significant and I'm going to pick up. So then the reason I've been tracking the materials as well, because sometimes it said she made it out of sand, sometimes she made it out of sticks, and I didn't know if it was going to be significant. And I don't think it is anymore, but for the first few, the author really did describe what the altar was made out of. And then around, when she was in the forest, the author says, you have noticed altars are built with whatever materials are close at hand at the time. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was very interesting as a spiritual metaphor. So I paused on that. And I noticed the next altar she makes in chapter 9, there is no material listed. So up until that point, material was listed when the shepherd said, make an altar. There are 2 situations where she just had a moment, a revelation. The first one was when she was in that cove. I thought that was a beautiful, by the Sea of Loneliness. She goes to that cove and she sees it empty. And when she is drawn to return to it, she sees that it is filled. And she has this moment of, I'm going to go click on it so that I can get the, I think it's this one. The empty cove is now filled. Lord, may I be, or shepherd, may I be like this cove, empty now, but knowing I will be filled with the things you've promised. And so there was no actual physical altar, but she picked up a piece of quartz to remember this moment. There was another one when she was by the pyramid in the previous week, and she had found the flower. And she realized the flower was acceptance with joy. And that seems to be the first lesson that she's really learning. Everything, chapter 6, chapter 7, chapter 8, even the first half of chapter 9 was all about acceptance. Well, so 6, 7, 8, I think the message was acceptance with joy. And so she picked up the pebble and put it in her travel bag. I find those, as I started tracking this, the thing that I regret not tracking, and I'm not going to go back, I think in a future read through of this, I'd really like to kind of note her relationship with sorrow and suffering, because they're like, one of the things that really stood out to me when the shepherd first introduced her to these companions, the shepherd says they speak a language that you do not know, but you will learn. And I don't know if you noticed in chapter 9, and I should have put a sticky note on it, so I've got to find it.
They speak to her.
They speak to her, yeah.
And there's the thing that I noticed, I was going to bring this up, the thing that I noticed the most about that particular instance is they speak to her, she responds to them, but there's no reference of the fact that she's astonished or recognizes that suddenly she can understand them. She just does.
Yeah. Then she felt her 2 companions take her hands in theirs and heard them say, do not be afraid, much afraid. Which...
do not be your namesake.
Speaking of that, you had made a comment when we were driving yesterday that after the lesson of accept with joy, she says, I am acceptance with joy. And the shepherd runs into her, sees her and says, oh, my little acceptance with joy.
Yep.
What was your issue after that?
He never uses that name again. Every time the shepherd talks to her after that, and there's actually multiple times between the middle of chapter 7 when he first recognizes her by that name and all the way to the end of chapter 9. Like, they have a lot of interactions, her and the shepherd. and he uses much afraid in every case.
I
Or a little one, like he doesn't use the acceptance with joy name, which I recognize her name is much afraid until he gives her new name.
That was my argument.
I recognize that. But if that's the case, he shouldn't have referred to her as acceptance with joy, recognizing that name for her if that's not going to be her name.
Take it up with the author, which you cannot do because she has since passed away.
But I mean, it's not a huge thing. It was just one of those little details of the you need to pick one or the other type situation.
And I just saw it as in this moment, I recognize your willingness.
Right.
So we read that one differently. And I think that's why we're both here to talk about moments, because things that stand out to me don't necessarily stand out to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so chapter 7. What was all about?
That was the Sea of Loneliness, the Lake of Loneliness.
On the Shores of Loneliness.
Shores of Loneliness. So yeah, this was interesting. I found this really interesting because she comes to this. So she goes through the desert. She comes out of the desert, and now she's on these shores of loneliness, and it's gray and it's empty, and the mountains, the high places are off in the distance and almost invisible to them. Like they're just so far away. She feels like they're forever away, and they're walking, and it's described as being like this very like dreary, not dreary, but like misty, bit of fog. Like it's kind of this whole idea of, it almost feels like, you know, that morning when you go out camping, you go down to the lake, but the sun's come up, but it's all in cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there's light. Yes, you can see, but it's just this kind of shadowy gray. But it's still early morning, so it's the mist, and they're just walking along this. And as they're walking, and the only natures that they see is the scuttling of crabs and the occasional seagull. And as they're walking, she starts to appreciate what nature is. She starts to
see things she hadn't
noticed. She starts hearing the songs of the gulls. She starts laughing at the dance of the crabs. It starts to brighten up.
Oh no, that's not it.
And she finds joy in the loneliness.
Yeah. Along this sea of loneliness, her enemies return. Pride brings with him resentment, bitterness, and self-pity. And I think it's interesting that loneliness is when they return, and how they are standoffish.
Mm-hmm.
And the messages they saying. Pride says something like, "I told you so." Everyone is going to be laughing at you. Resentment says things like, "You act like such a blind idiot. Who is this shepherd you follow?" Bitterness is, the more you yield to them, the more he'll demand of you.
Mm.
And self-pity is, "Oh, poor much afraid. It's too bad, you know. Like, you're so devoted." And there was something that the shepherd had said in the desert, because the desert was all about looking at the threshing floor,
mm-hmm.
The grinding of wheat, so I saw it as like there was the grinding of and threshing of grain. There was the potter's wheel, and then there was the fiery furnace. And in one of those places, the shepherd said the line, "They are bruised for a reason, but not or they are bruised for a time, but not forever."
Yeah.
And so one of them makes a comment about, this is self-pity, says that you yield to him, he thinks up new ways to wound and bruise you. This last remark of self-pity was mistake, because the word bruising suddenly reminded much afraid of what the shepherd said. And there are so many times where we could be in a place of self-pity or bitterness, or we're on our and we're like, oh God, what's going on? And we're the messages these enemies are saying come out of our mouths. And in saying that, sometimes we even go back to something like, oh, I read scripture about this. God gave me a message about this. I've done that.
Yeah.
For myself.
The other thing that's remarkable about that particular instance is she stands up for herself.
Yeah, calls the shepherd right away.
And I think, is it that case where she actually throws a rock at one of them?
I think that's in the next. It might be this one.
I thought at one point.
Let me see.
She.
Oh yeah. It's right after that. One day when her companion seemed to be sleeping for a while, Much Afraid wanders off, and Pride steps out, and she instinctively defends herself. She picks up a stone.
Yeah. The other interesting thing is why her enemies came to her. Do you want to?
You can do that one because
I thought it was really interesting. So she's in this happy place. She has found joy in the sea of loneliness. The world is brightening up. She's seeing all the beauty of nature, and she is suddenly caught off guard by her enemies. And when she calls the shepherd, and the shepherd comes down and scares them off, sends them away. She asks him, "Why did my enemies come back?" And he says, "Your enemies came back because you were impatient. You thought that you should already be going up to the high places, and I had not sent you there yet." And she recognizes that and says, "Yes, you're right."
Yeah, there's a place where. Are you talking about the place where she thinks the road's turning and she runs ahead of sorrow and suffering?
I thought it was in that previous one.
Some of these encounters start to blend together a little bit.
That was in chapter 7, but anyway,
it might be chapter 8.
But yeah, and then she finally gets out of the sea of loneliness.
Yeah. On this old sea wall, again, there's need for the shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Much Afraid still stood quite dumb, with dismay and shock. She began to. It could not be possible. It couldn't. Yet again, the shepherd was saying no and turned her to the right, away from the high places. Hope deferred maketh the heart sick, said a wise man long ago. How true he spoke. And that's when bitterness comes back. That's the one that I thought you were referencing. Be of good cheer, says the shepherd. It is I, not afraid. Be not afraid. Build me another altar. And this time, so the first time it was her first time putting down her will. And this time it is her, where is it? Somebody's messaging me. Oh, I can't find it.
It's in your spreadsheet. I'll bring up your spreadsheet.
Thanks.
So
one on
the first time,
you gotta go for item. It's G.
The first time it's her heart-trembling, rebellious will.
Yeah.
And this time it's her whole will.
Yep. And then the next time, she has this. Yeah, this one is her whole will, and there's another one where, yeah, trembling will. Okay, that one comes up later in 8. There are 3 altars in this chapter 8.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one is in chapter 8 is this one right here. Is that right?
Yeah.
So she's done her rebellious will. This is her whole will. The next one in the chapter is one that shepherd's not there to say make an altar. She is realizing how dreadful it is for my enemies, or dreadful for the shepherd's enemies because he is victorious, and he then makes me victorious in front of them. It reminds me of the Lord is my shepherd, because it ends with he prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies, raising me up. He anoints my head with oil. That's a place of honor. That's what I thought of. I underline things.
Yeah, you write in books.
Do you write in books? So this is the another place where the path turns. But here she was, still farther away from the high places, indeed further than ever before. And sometimes our journeys in faith do take these roads. Like, I was talking about this with Abraham, how God gives them this promise of a baby. And then they're both Sarah passes the age of childbearing years. They are past what is possible, and they are now further than the possibility of this promise coming true in their minds than when when the promise was first given. Life circumstances seem to be taking them away from what God wants. You are smirking.
No, sorry.
Okay, I like this. You may think that Much Afraid was altogether too much given to shedding tears. I'm like, no, I'm with you, sister. I cry over these moments too. But remember that she had sorrow as a companion and a teacher. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, the other thing that it's mentioned a couple of times in regards to her breaking down into tears, her being visibly upset. But it's mentioned at one point that she was visibly upset, but there was no one there to see it.
Yeah.
It was in her own private place or whatever.
There is to this to be added that her tears were all in secret.
Yeah.
Okay. I missed the second one. What's the last?
The last one is
on what page?
It is on page 66.
Page 114.
Page 114.
Okay, so right after that, she's remembered. She looks in her heart. She sees that the heart that was planted the seed of love, I think it's called. It's starting to grow. There's a bud, and then she noticed next to it is a replica of the heart or the flower she saw in the desert. And this is a place where she really goes, behold, here I am, growing in your heart, acceptance with joy. And so all of this needed to happen so that she could get to the place yes, of course, I remember. How do I keep forgetting? Why, yes. Actually, it's why, yes, of course. I was forgetting. And she kneels down, makes an altar. And this is the altar that they say you make it out of what's available. And she goes, what do I put on the altar? Because every other time it's the shepherd making an altar and telling her what to put on it. This is the first time she's alone for when the sacred flame comes. The by the sea, she makes an altar, but it's just for her in the cove. The shepherd hadn't set it. There was no fire. Same as by the pyramid. She made a little altar. She picked up a pebble, but there was no fire. This is the first time it's going to happen in the book. And it might be the only time because I don't remember heading for it. But this happens where she does it on her own, based on what she's just come. And she thinks, so she's put her rebellious will, her whole will. What's she going to put on the altar? Do you remember?
I do.
What is it?
It's her heart.
Yeah.
She puts her whole heart on the altar.
And she doesn't know what's going to happen. Is the flower that she's hoping to bloom going to be burnt up? And what's discovered is on the altar among the ashes. That's before that. I should have highlighted it. Essentially, she gets her heart back. Okay. This time, though, there was a flame of fire and burnt up the six, but the bud was still on the stem of the plant. Perhaps, thought Much Afraid, because it is too small to offer. but nevertheless, something lovely had happened. So I think her thinking, and this is a point, we can be in a moment of surrender and still have the wrong logic. She thinks that her bud wasn't enough,
Right.
it's too small. And I think what the shepherd was saying, or the author was intending to say, is this is the gift being given back. But nevertheless, something lovely happened. It was as though a spark of the flame had entered her heart and was still glowing there, warm and radiant.
Yeah.
And then among the altar there was another pebble, and she put it with. So now there were 6 stones of remembrance lying in the bag. And I like that's the first time they're called that. I should make a note about it. Being called 6 stones of remembrance. And I think it's very, very good to have things that we hold on to, be it in a journal or notes we leave in our Bibles. I know my mom has all these little sheets of paper that she puts in. Sometimes it's a Bible verse, sometimes it's a prayer, things that she is holding on to as promises.
Yeah.
There's many ways to capture that. Okay, on to, you need to read it because
The Great Precipice Injury. So this is a really, I mentioned that we probably have a lot to talk about in this chapter. I might be wrong. I had a number of things that jumped out at me. The big event here is she arrives at the bottom of the foothills leading up to the high place.
Yeah, so the path at the end of the, like, crossing the seawall goes through a forest. She's come out of the forest. The path is leading towards the high places. It hardly seemed to matter now that sorrow and suffering were still with her, because hope leaping in her heart that soon they would cease to be her companions altogether, for she came to the mountains again. And there's a moment where, like, she comes over they're at the top of this hill, and they see down the journey straight to the mountains, and she sees the mountains, and it's at sunrise. It seemed to her at that moment that all the pain and postponement, all the sorrows and trials of the long journey she had made were nothing compared to the glory that shone before her. And I think we have these respites in the midst of what is coming.
Yeah. And she is very excited.
Very excited. And then the whole time she's watching, she's seeing these steep cliffs, and they get bigger and more daunting the closer. So she's going, okay, there's going to be a little footpath. There's going to be a gully that we don't see. It reminds me of Lucy in Prince Caspian, where she keeps saying, we need to go this way and follow Aslan, and nobody else can see Aslan. And they're like, that's a gorge, there's no way down. But when they finally follow Lucy, they find that there's a path that you wouldn't have seen unless you got there. Yeah. And so that's what Much Afraid is hoping for. And they come, and the path just ends, and there's cliff.
At a wall.
Like,
it just runs up to a sheer wall.
And I feel for Much Afraid, because 2 months ago, you took me bouldering at a local rock climbing wall.
Yep.
And you and the companions we were with, there was 3 of you, yep. And then there was me. And they all went up the beginner wall pretty easy, did a couple other beginner routes, and then they were starting to try, like, the intermediate things, and then trying some of the harder ones with, like, ridiculous attempts, but they were all having fun.
You were having fun too, watching us.
I love you deeply. Fun was not the words I was thinking of that night. I did my test. I didn't go all the way up. When we first came in, we had to show that we knew how to fall off the wall. So they had taken us through a roll that you do when you fall off or jump off. Because you're not supposed to just jump. You're supposed to, like, kind of tuck and make yourself a tuck and roll. And I went there's a picture as high as I went, and I never went higher. And I just kept getting frustrated, and I have a number of reasons why I recognized that I was just struggling with it. but I was broken. Like, I'm like, in my heart, I was just so sad that I couldn't participate. I was feeling a number of things,
Uh-huh.
and it was awful. And I just couldn't. And so I feel for Much Afraid. I feel for her going, my feet don't go up there. And to make matters worse, there's this whole beautiful scene of a hart. So the type of deer.
That's gonna get blurry.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to. There. The one with the horns is the hart, and a hind is the female. Kind of like we have a bull and a
Go.
doe. Yeah. I was thinking cow.
Oh, yeah, bull and cow. Yes.
Are bulls cows? Like, because I think
Yes,
of
they're
the
bovine.
species bovine. Okay, anyway. But you have like a goose and a gander. Hart leads and the hind followed, and she was watching them leap up on these places, and she's seen places where she would not be able to go. And again, Sorrow and Suffering say, speak to her. And they say, call the shepherd. And she almost has a temper tantrum. She's like, I can't, I won't. He's just going to ask for an altar, and I just can't do it. And she's not wrong. By the end of the chapter, there is an altar made. But that's not, when the shepherd finally shows up, what she expects and what is given do not match. So she's here, she's upset, and who appears?
Craven Fear, her ex-forced fiance.
Yeah, and he's ready to drag her back.
Yeah, like he effectively threatens her with physical violence. He like straight up says, I will take you back with me. Almost like whether you like it or not, you're coming back with me. And she again tries to stand up for herself, but she refuses to call the shepherd, even in all of that, for a while.
I said she threw a temper tantrum. She wasn't. She was sobbing. I'm afraid to call. I am so afraid that if I call him, he will tell me that I must go that way, that dreadful, dreadful way, and I can't. It's impossible. I can't face it. Oh, what shall I do? And Sora says, you must call him. If I call him, shuddered Much Afraid, he will tell me to build an altar, and I can't. This time I can't. So Craven Fair laughs triumphantly. And then she cries out to the shepherd, O Lord, why am I oppressed? Undertake for me. My fears have taken hold of me, and I am ashamed to look up. And what does she expect? Condemnation, rebuke, and
the
reproach.
The afraid to look up. There's the physical aspect of that, not just in what she's saying there, but because at one point she sees the sheer wall, and just, I don't know if you've ever, I know you've done it before, I've done it before, where you hit this point of sorrow and you literally just turn your back against the wall, hit the wall and slide down and kind of like just crumple against the wall. And she does that. She sees the sheer wall. She sees like jutting out cliffs, and she just collapses against this wall. And she refuses to look up anymore at what she has to climb. And so when she says, I am ashamed to look up, I think it's not just to look up at the shepherd, but just to look up at this sheer cliff above her that she has to climb. Like,
I hadn't thought of it that way.
Because she's literally she's taking her head down. She does not want to look up at this thing, that this insurmountable challenge that she has in front of her as she sees it.
Yeah. And the shepherd shows up in a cheerful voice and is like, why much afraid? Be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid. This is the line that I really like. Without a hint of reproach.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk. And he reminds her of his promise. He reminds her that she would have hinds feet. And that he would help her develop hind feet. O shepherd, you said you'd make my feet like hinds feet and set me upon the high places. Well, the only way to develop hinds feet is to go the paths which the hinds use, like this one. I don't think I want hinds feet. And then the shepherd's like, I think I know you better than, well, he doesn't say I think. I know you better than you. Right now, your fear is keeping you from wanting what you want.
I do appreciate that, though, is the idea of I don't want Heinz
Please,
speed.
I take back what I want. I take it back.
Yeah, because you think about that in life. You're like, Lord, I want to follow you. And you get this feel of, then do this thing. You're like, you know what? I don't think I want to do that.
Well,
because that seems a little bit too much for me. That seems a little bit too impossible for me. Like, I don't think I can do that thing that you've now said in front of me. I take it back.
Yeah. There's this thing I've heard in multiple prayer groups and church circles, Christian circles, of people saying, don't pray for patience because he's going to give you a trial. And I've heard people say this next line that Much Afraid says, not necessarily in these exact words, but it's that same sentiment. But I never dreamed you would do anything like this. I know I surrendered to you. I know I agreed to go where you tell me to go, but I never dreamed you would do anything like this.
Yeah. You kind of wonder if there are some people that we know who have done some amazing, great things. We think of people like Mother Teresa or other people who've gone out in such a very well-known, very large step of faith. And you wonder at some point at the beginning of that journey if they went, I never believed that this would be where the Lord would send me.
Well, a lot of the writers that I read, Robert Frost had a whole chapter on this, that there is this season or the time that it's been called different things by different people, but it's like the dark night of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lonely journey where maybe you feel spiritually dry, where you're not connecting and you're remaining faithful, and you're like, I knew that it was going to be hard, but I never dreamed it would be this.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple pages, not chapters, but pages of this conversation of her admitting where she's at.
Yes. Sorry, continue. There's one illustration that I really like in there.
Jellyfish?
Yes.
But I'm a jellyfish.
Yeah. She makes a statement of me climbing that way would be like a jellyfish.
Yeah.
It's too much. And the shepherd says, but don't you know, I love doing the impossible. Nothing pleases me more than turning a jellyfish
into a mountain goat.
Into a mountain goat. And
that is my special work. Transforming things to make Much Afraid, for instance, and transforming things to take Much Afraid, for instance, and transform her into, he broke off and then went on laughing. Well, we shall see later what she finds herself transformed into.
Yeah.
That actually makes me pause. This is one that I'm gonna get you to think about, and maybe you at home as you read this book. Where on your journey, what name would you have given yourself or give yourself? I think what's the heart thing that God is still working on transforming you? So Much Afraid. Insecure might be something for someone, or proud might be one for someone. What would be the name that you think, if you were in Much Afraid's, what name would the author given you as your core? Anyway, something to ponder. Okay, I highlighted something, but I don't know why. Oh, I know why. Okay, so he has taken her to this precipice, the Mount of Injury. This whole mountain range stretches a long way beyond this in either direction. Everywhere it is steep or even steeper than here. There are even more terrible precipices on the sides. Mount Reviling, Mount Hate, the Mount of Persecution, and others besides. But nowhere is it possible to find a way up to the high places and into the kingdom of love without surmounting at least one of them. This is the one which I have chosen for you to ascend. So she's going to climb Mount Injury. I don't know. That just gave me a lot of pause. I think the question to ponder on that one is, why does the Kingdom of Love require, or these mountains come before the Kingdom of Love?
Yeah.
And then he said something interesting. So the journey of getting to this mountain was the first lesson. You've been learning a lesson of acceptance of joy. This is the letter A in the alphabet of love. Now you must learn B in the alphabet. And he doesn't say what B is yet.
Nope.
So she's got the A down, acceptance with joy. And now she's going to learn A. And the last thing that happens in this chapter, he gives her a gift, a drink. And he says, have some before you start. And anytime you are feeling faint on your way, take another sip. And she did, and read the label on the bottle, Spirit of Grace and Comfort. And when Much of Red had taken a drop or two, she felt so revived and strengthened that she was ready to begin the ascent. So this coming week, we're going to read The Ascent into the Precipice of Injury, The Forest of Dangers and Tribulation, and In the Mist.
Okay.
That's what's going on now. I am so enjoying rereading this. I hope you are enjoying coming along for the adventure with us. And what color do you think we should choose? Those are the things happening right now. Any closing thoughts?
No. Other than I'm enjoying the story.
Are you glad you're reading it?
Yeah.
Since I've kind of voluntold you to be involved.
I'm glad I'm reading it with you, and we have a good chance to have these discussions.
Me too.
Because we often don't read the same books, so we try and tell each other what books we're reading, but it doesn't quite have the same.
You don't love the cozy mysteries quite as much as I do. Okay. Friends, thank you for joining us for this edition of the No Reading Required Book Club. We will be back next Tuesday for another edition, looking at chapters 10, 11, and 12.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll see you next
Till
Tuesday.
next time.